Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on this Yevamot staf Kuf Chaf. We are going to begin on Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis, in the middle of the Amud by the new Mishnah. You have Shtei Yevamos, Zu Omeres Meis Baili. So one woman says, "My husband died." V'Zu Omeres Meis Baili, and the other one says, also, "My husband died." Rashi says these are Neshei Shtei Achim. These are women that are married to two brothers. So basically they're saying that both of these men died. Now, we know that they're believed to say, "My husband died," but we don't believe them that for the other woman, so therefore we're going to end up seeing that she's not going to be free l'shuk. And that's the reason why, even though she said, "Meis Baili, zu asur mnei bala shel zu, v'zu asur mnei bala shel zu," she's still going to be, they're going to be usher to go to the shuk. They're believed that their husbands died, but since they both didn't have children, they both have to do yibum. Now, even though the other woman said that, "No, my husband's dead," it doesn't make any difference, because she's only believed as far as her, but not enough to be able to say that she doesn't have to do yibum, and therefore she's going to be locked in. It says Rashi, "Zu asura d'shemachayhu." Maybe he's alive, who's a kukaloi, and therefore she has an obligation to marry him through yibum. Naviafal pish ishto ameris meis. Even though the other woman said the guy died, enu nemenes aviyavamta shetinase alpiha. We're not going to believe her to be able to marry to the shuk. Shein yavama meida al chaverta, because the yavama cannot testify against her friend. She achas bechamish nashim shein nemenes lahida. As we mentioned before, these are one of the 5 women that are not believed. And then the Mishnah says as follows: what if Lazu Adim, Lazu Ain Adim? One of the women has actual witnesses to verify that her husband's dead, and the other one doesn't. So Eshish La Adim Asura. So the woman who actually has witnesses, she is going to be Asur, even though obviously she's not married, but it's possible that she is now obligated to do yibum to the other guy. The eshein lo edim muteras. Ironically, the one who just says, "My husband died," she's going to be mutter because the other man, there's witnesses that he's dead, and therefore she does not obviously have to do yibum because there's testimony, there's witnesses verifying his passing. Wazu bonim, wazu ein bonim. So let's say there's no witnesses. One woman has children, which would mean that she doesn't have to do yibum, and the other one does not have children, which means she would have to do yibum. So, eshesh banim, obviously the woman who has children, muteras, she's free because she doesn't have to do yibum. Veshein banim asura, which is pretty obvious. And now we have a case of 4 brothers, and this Yavmu, and they did yibum. So umesu, and those 2 died. Umesu hayavamin asuras linase. We say they're not allowed to get married. So on this, Rashi says, "Nisyasvu shahaya lehem kan shnei yavamin, v'nisyavmu," and they did yibum, she'isha she'amra meis baili tisavim. The woman who says, "My husband died," she did yibum. V'reishakoi. This is going in the beginning of our Mishnah. Shein lehem lo edim lo banim. There's no children, there's no witnesses, and therefore they're only believed to say that their husband died, but not to free them. We say that even when these men died, it's usher for them to go to the shuk. Zumimne bal rishon shel zu, v'zumimne bal rishon shel zu. Shem adayin him chayim. Maybe they're still alive. Now v'yafal pi shenasu shtehen li'avamin. Even though they these 2 married to the avamin, b'cheska shemesu balein, or the chazaka their husbands are dead. They're only believe for themselves. Avlachshav, kishia nasu l'shuk, nimso edusa shalzu moyel zu. Their testimony helps the other. Ven yevamos midas zu al zu sad heter, and they're not allowed to give such testimony. And this the Mishnah concludes: once they're mutter to do yibum, says Rashi, b'cheska shemesu balehem sulo mitzteran. We're no longer going to answer them. So, continuing the Gemara. Tana lezu edim ubanim lezu lo edim v'lo banim. What happens if a different case? You have one woman who has witnesses that her husband died, and she has children, and the other woman has no witnesses and no children. So shtein mutaros. In that case, they're going to both be mutter. Why? So think about it. The one who has banim, obviously she's free, and the one who didn't bring witnesses, but the other woman did bring witnesses. So therefore, that's enough for her not to have to do yibum. Nisyasvu, let's say they did yibum, which again is going back to the case of the four brothers. Umeisu hayavamin, and similar to the Mishnah we said before, and these two died. Asun in aser. Belezer omer hoya b'hutu yevamot l'chol adam. Boy Rabbi, my time to Rabbi Lezer. Why does Rabbi Lezer say this leniency? Mishum ksavar tsar idol chaverta. Is it because he holds that a woman could testify on behalf of her friend? Odilma mishum dehi l'mekalkala nafsha, because she's actually not going to cause such problems for herself. She's not going to do something which is so bad. It says Rashi, tsar idol chaverta the hashtei Yevamos sarastin, who these two Yevamos are actually co-wives. Renate sad saras l'nifsu. So my nafkimina. So on this, the Gemara says the difference as we continue to kuf chafam with Aleph is insube l'tzara mikmei dida. Will we allow her to get married to the co-wife in front of her? Says Rashi, isha shahalcham dinasiyah. So you have a woman that went to another country, in bal with her husband, uvavi amr meis baile. She comes back and says, my husband died. V'haisel kansar, and there's a co-wife. Imzu tinase be'edusa shalzu, is she able to testify? Is she able to get married? Kodem shitanasohi, before the other one gets married. So iyamrit saram idol chaverta, if in fact you can testify for your friends, afal gav do insiv, even if she didn't get married herself, mansivan lo l'tzara, the co-wife should still be able to get married first. Iyamri mishum dihi l'mekalkala nasha. So insiv mansvinan lo l'tzara. Ilo insiv lo mansvinan lo mai. In other words, maybe the reason why this is all happening is because she's trying to trick her, and she just wants her to get married, and all of a sudden her husband's going to come up, and all problems will begin. Maybe we want to wait until the one who testifies that Meis Baya will let her get married first, and therefore it'll be clear that she's obviously not doing it to hurt her friend. So l'chor, that should be proof enough. Once she gets married, then the tsar could do it. So the question is, do you have to wait until this woman first gets married for the tsar to be able to be free? So Tashma Rabbi Lezer Omer Hoya v'hutu Yavam and hutu l'chol adam. It says that once she's mutter to the Yavam, she's mutter to the shuk. Now, she's not going to cause problems for herself. That's the reason why when she got married, so then obviously she believes it. She's not just trying to cause problems. If it's because of causing, if it's because you can testify, even in the Reisha, she should be able to do yibum. So Nami El Shmamina Tamid Rabbi Lezer Mishum the insiv who it's only because she already got married. V'lomekalkal navsham. Rabbi Lezer, so Gemara says not necessarily. Rabbi Lezer l'devarim koimelahu. L'didi, according to me, tsar me'idol chaverta. She can testify for her friend v'afan gavdol insiv, even if she get married. Mansvinan law will allow the co-wife to get married. El l'didhu, according to you, odilimi is the insiv mansvinan law. At least once she gets married, then that should be proof enough that she could, the co-wife can get married too. Mishum dehivol mekalkal nafsha. She's not going to cause problems for herself. Rabbanan talmos nafshi im plishtim hu dekavda. Not necessarily. Maybe she will, just like by Shimshon, she'll allow the downfall of her friend, even though that's going to cause her own downfall by her getting married, causing problems for her just as much as for her friend. That's how much she hates her friend. Tashma. So not necessarily is this a raya. So you have a situation where she and her husband went to another country. So she comes back, so my husband died. So he said tinase, she can get married based on that testimony. But sarasa, however, the co-wife is a surah. So obviously we see that she's not believed. Rabbi Lezer Omer Hoya b'hutra he hutra namit sarasa. Now this mashma even without marriage, so it's a raya. So ema hoyel v'hutra v'nises. Maybe you actually have to add that word. That's because she was mutter and she actually got married, then the tzara is allowed afterwards. I v'leichash dilma begita asoy. Maybe she's hiding her get. In other words, maybe her husband really didn't die, but she was divorced, and that's the reason why she's getting married. She's just causing problems for her friend. Now, id in sivli Yisrael hachinami. If she married Yisrael, then you're right. That is a possibility. Once she marries a Kohen, obviously it's only because she's not a Gerusha, because a Gerusha cannot marry a Kohen. They would have investigated into the matter. It's based on her Eidos. Therefore, if she marries a Kohen, it's proof that her Eidos, what she's saying is true, that she actually believes Meis Bailey, and therefore, based on that testimony, she married a Kohen. She's allowed to, because she's an Almana. If she was a Gerusha, she wouldn't be able to. Okay. Next Mishnah. Ein ma'idin ela al parts of panim. Ima chaytim. So in order to be able to actually say that your husband died, you actually had to see his face together with his nose. Afal pi sheish simanim begufo v'kelev, even though there's simanim on his body or his garments, he has certain recognizable features or rings or necklaces. That's not enough. You actually have to see the person's face and nose. Furthermore, the Mishnah says, Ein ma'idin ela ad shetetze nafsho. You actually have to wait until the person dies. Yafil ru'u miguyud, even if you would see him cut up, v'tsolov, or hanging, v'chayo cheles boy, a wild animal ripping him to shreds, that doesn't prove it. You have to wait until he's actually dead. Ein ma'idin ela ad gimel yomim. You cannot testify except until 3 days, says Rashi. Imrohu b'tayich gimel yomim. When if you saw him within 3 days, me'idin alav. Im lo ru'u ad le'achar gimel yomim. You didn't see him until after 3 days. Chayshin and shema nishtanu mars pana ve'en ze shehem svorim. So if it has to be that the remains has to be within the past few days, within a day or two of his death. Otherwise, because the body could decompose after a few days, it may not be recognizable. You may think this is a particular person, it may not be. Everything is, there's so many variables. You can't just say 3 days. It depends on the situation. Tanarbana. Padachas v'lo partzuf panim, parts of panim. Parts of panim v'lo padachas en me'idin. So a person cannot testify if all they saw was the metzach, the forehead, or not the face, or the face and not the forehead, then you cannot testify. You have to see both of them with the nose. Omer b'aviyitem Rav Kahana Mikra. Pasuk says hakaris pneihem unsabam, that they recognize the face to be able to testify with them. Abba bar Marta dihu Abba bar men Yomi havi maski be debe reish galusa. He was he had a claim to the reish galusa for zuzi, for money. I see Kira dibeg biv lasa. He took some wax and he attached it onto a rug. Dibeg ba pusyai, and he attached it onto a forehead or a face. Chov kamaihu v'loy bashkura, and he walked by and they did not recognize him. So it sounds like this was a way of being able to disguise oneself so that a person would not be able to be recognized. And then the Mishnah said, "Af bi sheish simanim." It doesn't matter even if there's simanim; that's not going to be enough. Remember the simanim of deraisa. You tell me that means that simanim is not enough to be able to prove that this person is who he is. Reminhi matzu kosher b'kis. When it comes to finding a lost object, if it's tied up in a pouch, arniki or some type of money wallet, a tabas or a ring, oshenimsa ben kalev, it's found among vessels, a fil is man meruba kosher. Even within a long amount of time, it is kosher. Rashi says, v'leichashinan dilmahai kis v'hai tabas the inish achrina, that belongs to someone else, avi v'hai get acherhu alma samchina nasimana. Now this is referring to specifically the dinim of a get. So we can assume that this is that belongs to the same person. So why? Because simanim are deraisa. So Rabbi Lukasha, Harabana. It's actually a machlokus whether or not simanim are deraisa. The sanya ein meidin al hashuma. A person is not allowed to testify literally about a mole. Rabbi Lezer ben Mahavai oimer meidin. You can testify upon seeing someone with a mole, if that's a recognizable siman. So Maila b'hakamifli, the Marsav is siman deraisa, and therefore even based on a mole is enough to be able to testify that this person is who they are. Marsav is siman derabanan. So Rabbi the Kul Yama siman deraisa, siman deraisa, hacha b'shuma matsuya b'ben gili kamifli. A ben gili, Rashi says shenayel de perik echad v'mazel echad. Person who could potentially look exactly the same. And therefore, just because you have a shuma, that doesn't mean it's a recognizable mark enough that it's you and no one else. Marsav shuma matsui ben giloi. Marsav ein matsui ben giloi. In other words, a ben giloi, this could be your ben giloi, so it's not necessarily a proof. So even if simanim or deraisa, this may not be enough. The ikad yamri hacha b'shuma hasuya lishtana isachar misa kamifagi. It's possible that you could have a siman, but it can change after a person's dead. Once person dies and the body decomposes, so the body changes form. Marsav asuli shtano sachamisa, marsav ena asuli shtano sachamisa. So the machlokas is this shuma, for example, something that will physically change on the human body, and therefore that would matter whether or not this is enough of a siman. As we continue to kuf chaf amid beis. Here we're talking about a siman muvhak, which Rashi says the afag of the simanim derabanan, a siman ki hai samchinan. If it's a very recognizable siman, a strong siman, that we will believe. Even though if you hold regular simanim derabanan, the siman muvhak is much stronger. Kamifki marsavar siman muvhak, or marsavar lav siman muvhak. According to the one who says the siman deraisa, hakatani afapi sheish simanim begufa v'kelav. So then, what's the whole deal over here? Why is it not enough? It says if there's a siman, if it's deraisa, then if it's on the body or your kalim, that should be good enough. And Moran says gufa darach v'guts. When it means the siman on a person regarding his body, it just means he's tall or short. That doesn't really mean anything because there are many people who are tall, many people who are short. So that it means, you're right, really simanim, if it's deraisa, something on your body should work, but it's got to be something which is more unusual than just being tall or short. Kelev de chayshin l'she'ela. It's in the event that we're afraid that maybe this object was borrowed. Do we really think that maybe someone just borrowed it and therefore it's someone else? Chamor b'simani ukov heichi mahadrinan. So when it comes to a donkey with its saddle, how could we return it? Maybe the saddle was borrowed. Lo, shaili inish uchba. Now, a person generally will not lend out a saddle. Why? Dimit sakev leila chamar, because it will hurt the donkey. So it's specific to the animal. So that's not something which is typically borrowed. Matzu kosher b'kis, but we said that if it's tied up, uva arnik tabas heichi mahadrinan. So how do we return it? The answer is tabas chayish l'ziyufe. When it comes to a ring, we're afraid there's forgery, so don't lend it out. Keys for arniki menachshi inshi v'loy moishle. A person generally doesn't lend these things out because Rashi says shel yitul ze mazalai, because like your mazel can be taken away. The Yemois aim of kelev, when it's referring to kelem, it's bechiyuveri v'tzumki, white and red, which Rashi says delo amrinan havi simin. This is not really simanim. Ishchayrin hayu olavanim hayu de'enza simin shaharbi ishchayrim olavanim badumim. A lot of people have these types of colored clothing, so that really doesn't prove anything. Question 1: Mehem dalad hofanim. What are the 4 categories? Baha b'may depligi tan bebraisa ishuma olo. Whether or not shuma is a simin or not. So one answer, as we said. Maybe it's proof. The question whether simanim or deraisa or rabbanan. Maybe a shuma is matzoy and a ben giloi. Third is a shuma hasuli l'shtanos acharmisa, or a shuma a siman muvhak or not. Question 2. Ein me'idin el al partzuf afapi she simanim begufa v'kelev. So my lo havi Caleb simin. Why is Caleb not a simin? So he said either because we're afraid it may be borrowed, or we're talking about the simin is just the color of the garments, and the color of those garments really is not much of a proof. Okay, let's go a little bit further. So then the Mishnah said, "V'afil ra'u beguyud." Even if, let's say, you have to wait until the body is completely, definitely dead. Not even if the body is cut up. So in this, the Gemara says, "Remember the beguyud chaye." Does it mean that a cut up body will live? Or minhu adam enu matama. A person cannot be matame acheteti nafsho until the person's dead. V'afil beguyud, which is mashma that meguyud is not enough. V'afil goises. So temuye will matama. It's just saying that there's no din tuma. Mashma hoy michil chaye. Actually, it shows that the person will not live. It's just a gzeres akosav or some din by tuma that you have to wait until the person's dead. But that should still be meguyed is enough that the person's not alive to testify against them. So Omer Bailu Kasha, Harav Shimon Elezer, Harabon. It's actually Machlof. It's a sign Me'idin al HaMeguyed, the Ein Me'idin al HaTsolov. So according to one opinion, you could actually testify if the body was cut up, just not if it was hanging, because a person could have somehow gotten out of that. Reb Shimon ben Elezer Omer Aval Meguyed Ein Me'idin, which sounds like our Mishnah. Why not? Because a person could somehow stop the bleeding and they could somehow survive this cut. How could we establish a Mishnah like him? There's a story regarding this individual. That he was lowered into the sea. Will also be Yadam El Raglo did not come up except for his foot. If it's from the knee above, you can get married because obviously that person was killed maybe by a shark or something and bit off such a massive part of his body close to his leg, close to his body. But below the knee not. So we see that even if you have this massive gash, the din is that a person can still live. So it's not like him. Shani Maya de Marzumaka. That actually water is different because it could actually help. It says Rashi Machzikos. You may not be able to survive getting a cut by a knife, but the water itself somehow could protect you when it comes to such an injury. So this Arab, Deshakal Safsira, he took a knife. He was cutting up a camel. And it didn't stop. It would not stop from screaming. In other words, it's pretty clear that you can't survive getting this knife cut. So this was actually a weak camel, and therefore that's why it was unusual. Rava Omer besakin melubenes v'divrei kol. Actually, sometimes you have a knife which is meluben, which is heated, and therefore, while it's cutting, that actually could be part of the process of healing it because it could cause the wound to get closed up due to its heat. Okay, let's see one more question. We're going to stop there. TA 13. So the question is, can you testify regarding this cut? So what type of cut can everyone live through? So he says, B'maya lukuliyama lochaya, the maya marzumaka. Actually, I said the other way around. That water actually is worse because you'll definitely not live. However, when it comes to a knife which is heated, that could close up the wound.